Okay, everybody, we are at the end of the semester or the summer session, and we are working on our final projects. So, for this last assignment, I wanted you guys to begin working on that. So, kind of brainstorming things, and then, of course, creating some images to go along with your brainstorming session. Couple quick things that I just want to remind you about as we go into this final. So I'm not just looking for beautiful images here. I'm looking for a series of images that have some sort of cohesive element to them. So cohesion can come in many different ways. It can be a narrative, meaning a story all about one subject. It can be kind of a look and feel of things. It can be an examination of things such as shapes or patterns or any kind of formal characteristics. It could be, a series of portraits of people. So the cohesion, it's kind of wide open as long as all of the images look like they are part of the same project taken by the same photographer with the same skills in mind that we've talked about throughout the whole semester here. So with that being said, let's take a look at some of your work. And first up, we have Bonnie's work, and Bonnie is doing a project on Cheektowaga, and very specifically kind of the use of space in a commercial sense in Cheektowaga. And what I think she wants to convey to us is just how sort of over time, especially development and commercial mall developers have played a role, perhaps a negative role, in influencing the way this town is now represented or now appears to people. So one of the things she focuses a lot on is parking lots. So I think this is a great project, and I really love the concept of it or the idea of what it is. And it's pretty neat when we see concept kind of mirrored out or played out in the actual way that the photographs are arranged. So let me give you an example of that rather long way of saying what I wanted to say there. So here, she's talking about just how there's, these empty parking lots and empty areas in Cheektowaga that are there because of these commercial developers that have developed property and then left. Well, that sense of emptiness also is in this photograph. So the photograph is of an empty lot, but the photograph itself is also a photograph of emptiness. So look at all this empty sky space, all this empty pavement space. So that is really a formal element that contributes to the intellectual cohesion of the project. So Bonnie, big kudos to you. Really love what you're doing here. That shot is fantastic. This shot is fantastic too. I might go in and maybe just lighten up this parking lot area just like a teeny little bit here. I particularly feel like this sign here, we could lighten that up a little bit and just make it a little bit more interesting. But don't lighten it up so much that the clouds here go away. We almost, this image isn't in Photoshop, so I can't really do it here. But, basically what I would do is create a new layer, a new adjustment layer that's lightened up, and then just paint in this area that layer. So, lighten it up and use the layer adjustment brush to apply that layer to only this spot. So like that a lot. And, similarly, I think this image is great. The one thing that I would say to you, Bonnie, is that when we convert something to black and white, a subtle shift happens in our brains. What happens is we go from seeing reality to begin to see patterns and shapes. So if we look at this image, I think all of us kind of really perceive it or sense it as being a very real and very it exists in the world kind of space. Not that this image doesn't do that, but what strikes me immediately about this photograph, I start to see lines here. And the image isn't really about an empty parking lot or an empty space or a road. This image for me really becomes about lines. And I think it's that subtle shift towards formal elements or shapes and patterns that happens when we convert to a black and white photograph. So in this instance, I would just recommend to you that perhaps for your whole project, you keep it in color. I think, especially, sort of these muted colors that you're working with in these two images, I think they really work here, and I think they resonate, and they say something about, like, this isn't something that happened in the 1970s. This is something that exists right now. It's not a dream. It's not an imagined place. It's right now. It's real. And I think when we work in color, we especially are able to communicate that. So that's my one word of advice moving forward here. But other than that, I think you're doing great. I especially love how you are using, the idea of empty negative space in your photographs to reinforce the idea of all these abandoned empty places that exist in Cheektowaga. So great job, and keep up the good work here. So next up we have Alvin's work. And Alvin, you didn't submit a proposal, actual written proposal here, so I may not be entirely on the money here with what your project is about, but I'm going to kind of suss out what you got going on here, and hopefully we are on the same page. But for your final project, please do make sure you also submit the written portion of that, which is going to be your artist statement. So looks like you're working with a baseball game or a series of baseball games here. And certainly knowing that you're a baseball player at the college, I think it's really great that you're working in an area that you presumably enjoy being in. And then also it's a place that you probably see the game of baseball much differently than a casual observer would see the game. So I think that visual intimacy that you can bring to it that the casual fan wouldn't normally see, I think is going to make or break this project here. So your first image that you have labeled number 1, I really like. I love the deep saturated color in here. We've, throughout the semester, talked about the decisive moment, which is kind of that pinnacle where action kind of comes to a crescendo in an image, and certainly that's the case here. Whether this is the end of the game or perhaps a home run, in either case, I love how just the two players have come together here, and you've caught it right at that spot where their helmets are clacking together. And another thing that I really love in this image is sort of the impartial, sort of detached umpire in the photograph that creates a really nice juxtaposition for sort of all the emotion and energy that's being experienced by the players. And he kind of brings a sense of sort of rigidity and stability to the frame. So love that a lot. I think this is a really, really strong image. Your second image here, we've got a catcher that's, kind of looks like he's waiting for, play to finish. Presumably something's taking place on the field here. Whatever the case is, I think that, there's not that pinnacle of action that's ultimately going to draw us in. I mean, I kind of feel like this is, something we'd pretty much all see if we were sitting in the stands at a baseball game. In fact, the thing that kind of interests me a little bit more is even, this little interaction between the umpire and the bat boy, which again is probably something that most people don't normally see. Most of us are probably looking out at the field, following the ball, tracking that, and these little sideshows that take place, I think, also are worthy of our attention and perhaps something you can focus in on. Then it looks like we've got some of the players running in off of the field after, again, presumably another play. I like the shot, and again, I like how you set up the frame with the juxtaposition between the player and the umpire. Whenever we have foregrounds and backgrounds in an image, I think that really offers the viewer the opportunity to kind of begin to compare and contrast. And again, in this image, we sort of have the little smile or smirk on this player's face, juxtaposed against that really rigid stance of the umpire there. So I like that a lot. Lots of blue in this image. Just be careful. Don't get to the point where your blue is almost artificially blue. And I'm concerned that you're kind of straddling that fence right now. So maybe pull back your vibrancy in your images just a slight bit there. I love this shot. A couple things about it. So first of all, it kind of feels like that, you're creeping up or kind of sneaking in on kind of a quiet moment inside the dugout of the players. He kind of seems like he's almost looking past you, kind of looking out into space, gloves piled up behind him, and even, I don't know if that's the operator for the clock or the scoreboard or whatever the case is, but certainly even having that little piece of equipment in that image, I think altogether really kind of is a nice little documentary of what goes on behind the scenes and what goes on in the dugout that perhaps, again, the average public doesn't see unless they're actually right down there. And then lastly, a field level image that I think is great. I in fact would really love to see perhaps a few other images like this using that unusual vantage point. Because again, we walk through the world kind of at eye level, shoulder level, and everybody sees things from that vantage point. So when we're creating interesting photographs, if we want to break away from that common vantage point and offer the viewer something that they may not have seen before or something that's a little bit different than what they're used to, then I think getting down really low or getting an aerial shot of things really can be a way to break cliche, do something different, create visual interest in your images. So I like this a lot. Looks like the bags in the background are in sharp focus and the ball is a little soft. I think if it was me, I might choose to focus on the ball and have the bags out of focus. I think the ball, especially because this ball looks like it's a little gritty, looks like it's been played with a little bit, and has some character and texture to it. I think that would also help that. So moving forward here, Alvin, I just want you to create more images. Again, think about just getting us stuff that the common person or the casual observer of baseball wouldn't see. You've got an inside track or inside view on the game, so use that to give us images that might be uncommon, different, unique, fascinating, whatever the case is. And if you do that, I think your project will be a raging success. So get to it and look forward to seeing what you get us. And next up we have Leah's images, and she's going to be working with her sneakers or her shoes and just kind of recording the differences in them over the course of her lifetime and their lifetime. And I think it is a great project. Again, very close, intimate, personal, but also something that we probably all can relate to in the sense that, we all have our favorite shoes and, we like to wear them. So love this overview shot of it, looking kind of straight down. And I think the thing that really resonates with me is how going from left to right, we go from, a pair of sneakers that looks like they're probably pretty new, not very worn in, to ones in the middle that have a little bit of wear to them, to the ones on the end that are really, really beat up there. I like the fact that you put them on a pretty neutral background. The background is not busy at all. It's just, diffuse enough that the sneakers really stick out from them. In fact, probably should mention that the background is on the darker side. It looks like maybe a table or something like that. And it's brown. And that brown is a good contrast for the white of the toes that is on the sneakers. So when we have a light and it's placed on a dark in the background, it's really going to kind of jump off the page for us. In other words, it provides us with a really nice canvas that these sneakers are going to jump off of. So I love that a lot. Second image, focusing in on the laces. And I think this image is really great from two perspectives. So first of all, you've got some patterns going on in it. And the patterns are very aesthetically pleasing to our eye. So if you remember from our module on aesthetic skill, that repeating patterns certainly are just very, very visually pleasing to us. So you definitely have those repeating patterns from the laces going on there. But I also love how we've got the texture in the lace, and also, this one, the laces are a little bit untied and a little bit curled up. So it's really where our eye goes, and that's pretty neat, because if you remember also when we talk about breaking up a pattern, our eye is going to go to whatever breaks up a pattern here. Certainly these laces break up this pattern. They force our eye to go here. When it gets there, it begins to look at the texture in the laces and in the canvas of the sneaker. So again, kind of a pretty sophisticated image in its composition and the way you've structured it and your use of shape and pattern in there. So I love it a lot. And then again, really nice detail shot here that our texture especially comes out in that. So that works again for me very well. And I love how you're using this very shallow depth of field. If you remember that term we use, bokeh, you've got this great bokeh in the background here, and that causes us to look right at this canvas texture here. So anyhow, in this image, I think the one thing that we're going to have to try to do now with our remaining, you probably got to come up with another 5 to 7 images, is figure out a way to continue to tell the story without repeating the same image or the same type of image over and over and over again. So certainly I could see that maybe you want to include the bottoms or the soles of the shoes. I think that might offer, again, an interesting contrast and pattern. And I think actually maybe, throwing in a self-portrait of you wearing the sneakers also might be a neat way to go on this. So give it some thought, and just, remember, don't repeat the same photograph or a similar photograph over and over and over again. I think you've done a great job here of giving us a variety of perspectives and vantage points. But as you build the number of photographs that you're going to submit, I think it's going to become more and more challenging to get unique and fresh images. So keep an eye on that, and look forward to seeing what you can come up with. And last up, we have Andia's images. So she's going to do a project that, again, kind of revolves around her life, and especially her involvement in basketball. And then also, as I read along here, you're going to kind of include your dogs in there too. So I would say this: And you really need to focus in on one particular aspect of your life, whether it's the dogs or basketball. I think that having both of them in there perhaps confuses the message and kind of interrupts the cohesiveness of the project. So, think about this a little bit and perhaps stick to one of the two different directions. I think either one of those ways you could be, super compelling in the images that you present. However, the challenge for you is going to be able to show a dog in a way that demonstrates it's your own personal dog, and what are the unique aspects or unique personality traits that dog has. And then similarly, just like Elvin and baseball, I think that you have sort of an inside look at the sport. So you need to use that insider information to present images to the viewer that they might not normally see when they're sitting in the stands at a high school or college basketball game. So that's the direction you really need to go in on this. And then your images, I just want to show you this. It looks like you submitted your images wrong. So look at the size of them, 18 kilobytes. That is a super, super, super small image. And then when we go in and look at them, here's what your images look like. They're essentially 4 pixel, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 15 pixels wide. So perhaps you resized just a little incorrectly, which certainly is something that anybody could do. Anybody could make that mistake, I should say. If you're resizing, one of the tools you can use is the crop tool, which is this tool right here. And you can just go in and input the size that you want in inches. For example, this image I'm going to crop 4 inches by 6 inches, and then keeping it at 300 pixels per inch. And then all I have to do is just drag my mouse across it, and the area that's highlighted there is what's going to be cropped when I hit this crop tool like that. And then if we go into image size here, you'll actually see that it's now cropped to 4 by 6 at 300 pixels per inch. So just go back, take a look at your images. Obviously for the final, we want to make sure that everything is cropped correctly there for us, so we can actually see your beautiful images. So looking forward to what you have for us, and for everybody, just keep in mind you've got a little bit more time to work on this project. We're going to wrap up a week from today, next Friday, so make sure you put the time and the effort into this and make it look like your showpiece for the semester. And also just a reminder, make sure you go through Module 8 and complete that final exam. So anybody has any questions, give a shout or shoot me an email, and we can chat about it. Otherwise, look forward to seeing your wonderful final portfolios. Take care.